All right, speaking. So announcement, please contact me if you need any help. It's either for your academia performance, your learning style, or just how to college in general, or how to apply for grad school. Any questions, feel free to ask me. Also, I encourage you to email me and schedule an appointment. I know sometimes people don't like that. People might think it's intimidating to talk to the instructor. So please don't be afraid, just talk to me. Oh, and lastly, please make sure you submit your stuff successfully on eCampus. Otherwise, I can't grade them, which means when you submit some assignment, you should get an email saying that you successfully submitted this. If you didn't get that, you might not haven't submitted it yet. Sometimes it's like at this stage that you uploaded your stuff, but you haven't submitted it. Have you guys tried that? Okay, some students had that problem before, so please make sure you submit them successfully. All right, good. Any questions about last class or just the class in general? We're good? All right. Okay, so for today, we're gonna finish chapter 1. We're gonna first talk about the affect, behavior, and cognition. So the affect, they refer to the feelings that we experience as part of our everyday lives. And this is an umbrella term in psychology because under affect, we have emotions. They're relatively brief and intense changes in our conscious experience, and physiology, which occur in response to certain situations. So it has to have a reason for you to have an emotion. And your emotions is relatively short and more intense. So mood is either positive or negative feelings that are in the background of our consciousness and tend to last longer than most emotions. And for the mood, you don't need to have a specific reason. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So those are the two different terms under affect. But when we talk about affect in psychology, let's say if we were talking about affective science, usually we are referring to research on emotions and mood. Okay, so let's do an example for emotions. Is that usually we will feel happy when we hear some good news, right? We have some reason. And then we'll feel disgust when we see something or when we hear about some disgusting things. So it has to have a reason. For the mood is when you wake up and you just feel like you're in a good mood. Sometimes you just feel like you're in a bad mood for no reason. That's your mood. And it tends to last longer, maybe throughout the day or the whole morning or the afternoon. Right? Any questions on these two terms? Yes?
What's their relationship to each other? Does like emotions affect mood or vice versa?
It could. So let's say if you have a good mood when you wake up, but you hear some bad news, and then you might have like intense emotions for a short period of time. Once that emotion's passed, you might still have a good mood, but you might have a bad mood because of that emotion. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, very good. Good question. All right. Should be pretty simple. I was going to ask you guys to give me some examples, but it should be pretty easy, right? Pretty easy to comprehend. All right, good. Okay, so next we have behavior. So social behavior, they're interactions and influences between you and others. So, for example, we have social exchange. That's when we have sharing of goods, services, emotions with other people when you're interacting with other people. So social rewards is when you get positive outcomes after you interact with other people. For example, if you hang out with your friends, usually, hopefully, you will have positive emotions out of it, and you will get social support from your friends, right? So those are positive outcomes. And social cost, there are negative outcomes. Is when you have bad stuff happens when you're interacting with other people. And those will be your toxic friends. When you hang out with them, you have bad emotions, you will run into bad situations. So those will be social costs, right? Any questions on this? All right. Okay, so can someone give me an example of social rewards? Like when would you get social reward? Yeah.
Like joining a community and then your reward is having a support system.
Yeah, very good. So for having the support system, would it be good for your physical health or mental health or both?
Both.
Very good, very good. All right.
I was just gonna say like feeling of love and affection.
Oh yeah, yeah. So romantic partners, your family members, very good. What about negative outcomes, social costs? Besides your toxic friends, what else? Like what kind of situations will make you have social costs? Yeah.
That could be like a bad or like an abusive relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Abusive relationships. Yep. Very good. Anything else? So the more examples you can come up with, the easier it will be on the exam, because on the exam it's going to be all examples, scenarios. Yeah.
For the cost, does it have to be a negative thing or just something that you feel up to have the social exchange?
So usually we call negative outcomes is that you don't want that result. So sometimes when you give something to other people, you might feel happy about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that will be still positive. But if you waste time and you don't want to, that would be negative. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right. So we do know that some people feel happy after they donate, right? So we'll call those positive outcomes. All right. Good question. So we good on this? All right. Next, we have cognition. So social cognition refer to the thoughts that relate to social activities. So schema, those are a knowledge representation that includes some information about a thing, a person, or a group. So we have schemas about all the stuff that we know. For example, when I say Texas A&M, you would think of a university. So Texas A&M is a university. That's a schema for Texas A&M. What else? When I say Texas A&M, what would you think of? A room? Oh, maroon. Yes, information. That would be the school color. Maroon.
Field.
College, wait.
Field.
Oh, Kyle Field. Yeah, very good. Football. So that's a schema towards Texas A&M. Very good. So those are some kind of information about a thing, a person, or a group. All right, very good. And then we have attitude. Those are a knowledge representation that includes our feelings towards a person or a group or a thing. So for example, when I say Texas A&M, you'll be like, I like it or I don't like it. That will be your attitude. Same with people. Sometimes they don't like their out-group. A lot of times that will be your attitude towards them. Okay. So those are the two knowledge representation in your social cognition. Right. No questions, right? Okay. Okay. So no question. Let's do an iClicker question. Do you guys have your iClicker? Okay. Well, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't use iClicker. I got some emails, and some people don't have iClicker. And since we have a smaller classroom, I don't really need to know like the stats, how many percentage got it right or not. I can just see like a show of hands. Would that work? It'll save you the trouble using iClicker or buy it. Okay, so let's do this together for the online students too. Chen is talking to his friends during dinner. His friend asked Chen why he seems happy. Chen replied, I don't know, I just woke up and felt happy today. What is the best term to describe Chen's feeling right here? So A will be emotion, B is mood, C is attitude, and D is social exchange. So if you think it's A, raise your hand. No. If you think it's B, raise your hand. All right, very good. So all of you think it's B. So that's correct. We're excluding C and D is because we're asking about feelings. Yes?
I think people are trying to chat you.
People are trying to what?
Chat you on Zoom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did you see it?
And the more.
On the
Oh, it's
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they're chatting on their own because oh, okay. Oh, okay. Nice. Breakout rooms. It's a good idea. Let's do that, y'all. I don't know how though. Okay. All right, I'll try to figure this out. I'm not super familiar with Zoom yet. Oh, for you guys. When we are doing discussion, I'll try to do it. All right. Thank you. Oh, so we were talking about excluding C and D because we're asking about feelings right here. So it's either A or B. And because Chen doesn't know why he's feeling that, and it's kind of long lasting because, let's see, where is it? Oh, he woke up and felt happy. And this is during dinner, so it's a long period of time. So that should be mood. That's how you get your exam questions correct, is to pick out information from the question and then answer the best, get the best answers. Sometimes you might think there are two answers, but there should be an obvious correct answer. Because again, we're studying people. The stuff that we talk about might not apply to every single person, but for most people, we have a pattern. So we will always choose the answer that applies to most people. Okay? So if you guys are in physics, chemistry, that you only have like one correct answer, you might need to change the way you think. Okay. Okay, so correct answer is B. No question, right? Everyone got it right. Good. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about research methods in social psychology. We have descriptive and experimental. So for descriptive research, we have several methods. We have naturalistic observations, case study, surveys, and correlation research. We're going to talk about them one by one. For naturalistic observations, those are when people observe a behavior in the environment in which it typically occurs. So the example here, Jane, she will observe the chimpanzees in a forest instead of in a zoo or a lab. That's how she knows how the chimpanzee behaves in natural settings. So the strength for this is that you're in a realistic settings. The subjects often, they don't know they're being observed. So they will behave normally. So that's what we hope, because if you know that you're being observed, you might behave differently. And those will be the limit of this kind of study. So first, for naturalistic observation, you can only describe a phenomenon. It doesn't explain the cause or the effect. So when you see some kind of phenomenon or some kind of relationship, you will not know the cause and effect there. Second is for this kind of study, it will be hard to study private or rare events. Let's say if we're trying to study people's sexual behavior, you're not gonna hide in their room and then try to observe what they do, right? That will be unethical and illegal. So you cannot study private or rare events. Other examples as well. The reason I'm using that example is because I study the emotion of love. If you guys were a freshman here in psychology, you might have participated in one of my study. It's studying romantic relationship and the difference between intimacy and sexual desire. So they're both love when we talk about love in general in daily life, and I want to differentiate them. I'll see how that affects people's decision making. Yeah, so you can't do naturalistic observations in those circumstances. Next, we have self-awareness and social desirability. Is when your subjects know that they're being observed, they want to behave the best. They don't want to, if they're lazy usually in their room and then they know that they're being observed, they will try to clean up, right? They're not behaving like they used to be. That will be social desirability. And self-awareness is that they know that they're being observed. That's a limit for naturalistic observations. And next we have observer bias. So observer bias will be for the researcher, like me. I will have my own bias when I'm observing. Let's say I have a hypothesis thinking that all women should have long hair. And then when I do observations, I will tend to notice women with long hair. And I might ignore people with short hair because I'm looking for those information. That will be my bias, and it might affect the result of the study. So double blind is when the researcher and the subject, they don't know what they're observing, they're just simply recording. So that will be, or they're being observed. So that's the double blind design. And lastly, for this kind of study is that it has poor or no control on your variables. You simply don't interact, like you try not to participate in their activities. So you cannot control them. And that's why we can't have causal and effects from this kind of studies. Right. Any questions? All right. And next, we have case studies. Those will be the intensive examinations of a specific person or a situation. For example, if we want to study why Hitler did what he did, we need to study his journal, and we might need to study the people around him and then ask about his behavior. So it's going to be very intense on the details about Hitler. So the strength will be, the information will be very detailed. You get a lot of information. And you can study rare and private phenomena. But the limit is that it may not be representative. Because if we know what's happening with Hitler, it might not apply to other people. Same with other case studies. When we study them, we're studying them alone. We don't know how well that will apply to other people or other culture. So that's case study. For surveys, those are questionnaire or interviews, usually given to many people. The strength for this is that you can collect a lot of data very fast, and you don't need to spend a lot of money. Usually people do it for free or very cheap. The limit for this is question wording. So let's say I'm an international student, and my grammar is not that well. Well, in reality, my grammar is pretty good. But let's say that if I can't word them properly, or if I word them in Chinese language, how Chinese people would think, it might come off differently to you guys when you read them. So you might give me a different answer than I'm looking for. So that will be question wording. That's a limit. Same with just in the US, if I'm coming from a different background from you, I'm going to write differently. So people might interpret them differently if they have different backgrounds. Response bias. So response bias is when the participants, they try to guess what the researchers are looking for. If you guys have participated in psychology studies, have you ever tried to figure out like what are they looking for when you're in the study? Yeah, how many of you have participated in psychology study? Okay, usually you just go in and then do whatever they tell you to. You don't think about it like, oh, why is he asking me this, or why is she doing this to me? No? All right, you might want to think about it next time. So sometimes when people guess the intention of the researchers, they might try to cooperate. They'll be like, oh, this is what you're looking for, so I'm doing this. Does that make sense? Okay. Social desirability bias, that's what we just talked about. People want to look good. Let's say when I ask you questions about whether you do drugs, if people want to look good and they do drugs, they might say no, right? Even though we always tell them it's anonymous, but sometimes they just want to be a better person than they really are, they're going to answer not honestly. Okay, so that's the social desirability bias. Next, we have correlational studies. Those are the studies to examine the relationship between variables. And this kind of study answers two questions. First is whether one variable is related to another. And then how strong is that relationship? And you guys know correlation, right? Yes or no? Okay. If you know about correlation, show your hand. Okay, good. The reason I need to know that is because I need to decide whether I need to spend some time here. Okay, so since everyone knows it, I'll just skim through this real quick. So one example is that whether age is related to income. Do you think there's a correlation? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so do you think that correlation is strong? So it means that age strongly correlates with income. If you are older, you're going to have a lot more than a person who's younger, or it doesn't really matter. It matters a little bit. If you're older, you're just a little bit more richer. So do you think that's strong or weak? You don't know? Take a guess. Yeah.
Strong.
Strong? Yeah. So usually I think it's strong too. I don't have the data, but that's why a lot of times I just want you to think about it and discuss it. There's no correct answers. I think it will be pretty strong too. Yeah. Right. Oh, also I'm trying to learn names. Let me see. You're the one with Crocs, riding horses.
Yes.
What's your name?
Here.
Garrett. Okay, Garrett. Okay, next time when I ask questions, I'm trying to learn names. Okay, Garrett. All right, good. Okay, so for correlational study, strength. is that for this kind of studies, we can test predictions, evaluate theories, and it can help us suggest new hypotheses. And they're useful when we cannot manipulate the variables. The limit is that correlation is not causation. So when we talk about age is related to income, we know that age is not causing the income. There are some other variables causing the relationship, like your education, what else? Your family background, all of that. Okay, so there are a lot of examples here. If you click the link, you find a lot of examples, and they're very interesting. Let's do another example. Correlation is not causation. So we know that the consumption of ice cream is correlated with the people who are getting attacked by sharks. And that's a correlation, a positive correlation. But we know that it's not people buying ice cream causing other people to get attacked by sharks, right? It should be summer when it's hot. When it's hot, people are buying more ice creams, and people are going to the beach more. They're more likely to get attacked by sharks. So that's correlation, and it does not tell us anything about causation. We're good. Give me 1 second. This is very uncomfortable. All right.
Does it leave like a forehead line, like from the little?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
Does it leave like a forehead line from the little, like, face shield whenever you take it off?
I might.
The goggles. You know, like when you wear lab goggles, it leaves like the marks. Of
Yeah, I might, because I can't see it.
Okay.
I might. You can take a look. Well, you can't really too far, but I'll go to the mirror, I'll check, and I'll give you the answer next class. It seems like an important question. No one finds that funny? All right. Okay, next. We have experimental research. So usually in social psychology, we want to do experimental research. We want to do empirical research. That's when you conduct experiments. And that's how you find out the causal relationship. So there are 5 steps to conduct empirical research. You can remember it using optic. So first is to observe. Second is to predict. And then test your hypothesis. And fourth is to interpret your results and conclude them. And the 5th step is to communicate your findings to other people. Okay, so here will be a graph to show you how it works. So first you need to make observations. Look around you and see what interests you. And then you come up with a research question. For example, when I'm in the classroom and I look around, I see that all the men has shorter hair than women. And then I'll be like, that's interesting. And I want to do a study. That would be my research question. Why do men have shorter hair than women? Oh, that's just an example. That's not interesting. That's just a social norm. But that's how you find out what you're interested in, and then what kind of research questions that you want to ask. Next is to predict, is to construct a hypothesis. And then you will test that hypothesis using an experiment or multiple experiments. After that, you draw the conclusion. So if you accept the hypothesis, you will report your results. However, if you reject the hypothesis, which means that your hypothesis is wrong, you also report the results, but people might not care as much. But that's a problem. No findings is findings. Does that make sense? So if you find out something that's not working, it's useful information. You can tell other people, and other people will save their time. They're not going to waste their time to do the same studies, and it's informational. But in reality, is in journals, in TVs, they don't care about that. They only report the things that they think are interesting. That's a problem. But if you're doing research, trust me, either your hypothesis worked or not, those are useful information. You should report them. Okay, so let's go into details about those 5 steps. First is to observe. You need to find a phenomenon that's interesting to you and then generate a research question. All right. Second is to predict. You create a hypothesis and predict what will happen. For this, you will need to know your independent variables and your dependent variables. Do you guys know independent variables and dependent variables? If you do know that, raise your hand. Okay. Oh, so everyone knows that. Very good. Okay. So you don't need to go over that. So to remember that, it's just independent variable should be your cause, and the dependent variable should be your effect. And you manipulate your independent variable, and you observe your dependent variable. Well, make sure you know that, not just like, oh, I think I know that because it's going to be on the exam. If you are confused, you can ask me or take a look at the slides or go online. It's up to you. So let's do an example. Independent variable, it will be education levels, and then dependent variable will be income. So I think that education levels cause your income. It might not be the only cause, but it could be one of the causes. Does that make sense? Instead of age, that was another example. So can you give me a different example for IV and DV? I forgot to ask your question. Your name.
Me?
Yeah.
Kelly.
Kelly. Yeah. Good. Kelly. Okay. Example. Yes.
So like the independent variable would be like amount of sunlight, and like the kind of be like plant growth.
Sunlight and what?
Plant growth. Plant growth.
Oh, plant growth. Sorry, with the mask on, sorry, kind of hard to hear. Oh, also, if I misinterpret your question, just ask again. If I answer something that's completely different, just ask again, because it might happen to me. Sometimes I can't hear well, or I just interpret it wrong. Don't feel embarrassed, like, oh, he answered the wrong questions. That's not what I asked. I should be the one who's embarrassed. So just ask again. All right. Very good. So sum and plant growth. What else? Like more psychology related? What are you interested in your daily life? Yes. Oh wait. I'm sorry. Your name is Jay. Awesome. Yeah.
Like an independent variable could be like just having friends that are support system, and then a dependent variable could be being happier and healthier.
Yes. And how did you get that relationship? Like, how did you think that? Like, how did you get the hypothesis? What kind of phenomenon that you observed?
Like if someone is feeling lonely or something, then they obviously want a human connection. So having those friends around that they can rely on, they'll be happier.
So you observe that people are happier when they have more friends and they have like a romantic relationship, and then you make that hypothesis. Very good. And what's your name?
Francis.
Francis? Francis. Right. Okay, very good. So you need to know this for your final project, because I will like you to do an experimental study instead of correlational or naturalistic observation. Those are too easy. Those are lower levels. I want to I want you guys to design a study and really do it. Okay, very good. So after you know your variables, your independent variables and dependent variables, you need to know how to operationalize them. That's a long word. So the meaning of this is you need to know how to measure the variables. For example, you say sum is related to plant growth. How do you measure sum? Like, do you measure the temperature, or do you measure how strong the light is, or you need to know how to measure them? And growth is, are you measuring how, like the length or the width of the plant? So, or whether it grows flower or fruit. That's operationalization. For people, we also need to know how to measure them, like romantic relationship. You will need to send out surveys or interviews, ask them, are you in a relationship? And then you get that information, right? It sounds intuitive, but it can get complicated. For example, those are some example of how you operationalize them. Self-reports, physiological measures like your heart rate, your respiration rate, and you can observe behaviors. Now, let's do a class activity. First discussion is, let's say I want to measure how aroused people are under certain situation. How would you measure arousal? Okay, I'll give you about 1 minute to discuss with each other, and for the online people too. Yeah, you can talk.
Heart rate,
Yeah.
trying to think of like a situation. You could ask them like a survey question after
I was gonna say it's look at this, but I don't know how you would try to measure that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a 1 to 10 plus a heart rate would be like both like a factual, like scientific thing, and then also like whatever they think is happening, you know. So it's like a nice, you can compare with.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
All right, any conclusion? Yes.
I thought you could measure like physiological things like heart rate or like amount of sweat in your palms or like breathing and stuff like that.
Very good. Very good. What's your name?
Haley.
Haley? Haley, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Very good. Any other responses? No?
Chat too.
What?
On the chat.
Oh, on the chat? Oh, okay. Pupil dilation, breathing rate. Very good. All right. All right. What else? Yes.
We kind of talked about doing like a 1 to 10 scale to ask them after the manipulation.
Very
and how,
good.
like, their feelings on their own arousal.
Very good. Self-report. Can you think of the limits for that?
I mean, lying maybe.
Lying?
Them not really knowing for sure or lying about it.
Yes. Very good. Sorry. So itchy.
You're good.
Oh, man. All right. I had that problem. In my study, when I do the sexual desire condition, can you believe that after they see the manipulation, like about sexual desire, so it would be sexually explicit material, people reported more calm than they before they watched the video. It's just impossible. Impossible. You need to be honest in your study. You ruined my study. I hated it. All right, very good. Arousal. Very, very good. I'm trying to think any other fun examples. Oh, in my undergrad, one of my professors, she studied arousal in sleep. So she actually observed whether people, I forgot the term, erect during sleep, and then that was her study, that was her dissertation, which was super funny at the time. Apparently it's not funny for you guys. All right. Okay, so very good question, I mean very good answers. Good question too. Next, we have a discussion, is that I want to measure how aggressive people are under certain situation. How do you measure aggression? Again, I'll give you about a minute to talk about.
Yeah, like heart rate is still be a choice, right? Yeah.
Voice level, like how loud they are.
Yeah.
I said voice level, how loud they are.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, depending on like the person and the situation, you kind of like how hard they punch, or like how hard they, you know, like the force. It's kind of like, you know, like I'm sure someone's gonna hit harder if they're angry. You know.
It's like a bigger person.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
I'm DNA.
Huh?
DNA.
DNA?
Are you in class? Are you in class 360?
Yes.
I think we're in the same class.
With Tuesday, Thursdays, like,
Yeah.
All right, since we don't have much time, before I ask the question, I forgot to ask your name.
Zach.
Zach. All right, good. All right, how do you measure aggression? Yes.
We talked about how you could measure the force if like you were having them hit something. If someone was angrier, you would obviously have a lot more force. We
Yes.
also talked about you can measure like voice levels. If someone's a lot louder, they're
Yes.
more likely more aggressive.
Very good. So you will observe their behavior. Very good. What's your name?
I'm VNA.
Hmm.
VNA. It's like
VNA.
Yeah, it's kind of like the acronym DNA, but if you think VNA,
VNA.
then you'll pronounce it correctly.
Gotcha. VNA. I remember your name. I just, in my mind, it was a different pronunciation. That's why I was like, oh, shot. Okay. VNA. All right. Very good.
You can do like heart rate or like adrenaline levels.
Yes. Very good. Heart rate. What else? Should be pretty easy. Like, see how many times they cuss at people. Like when they're driving, how many times they flip the finger, right? Aggression. Very good. Very good. Oh, and this little kid. Okay, so hypothesis. Your hypothesis should be very specific, and it should be testable, falsifiable. So a good example is that I hypothesize that most people heart rate will increase before they take the exam. So it's in a certain situation, very specific situation, and predicting how they will react. A bad example would be I hypothesize that lying is wrong. Right? You can't really test that. How do you test whether lying is wrong? That's more ethical, and that's more subjective. Okay? So hypothesis is different from theories. A lot of times people try to use them interchangeably, but they should be different. Theories, they should be tested explanation, usually through research or experiment. They should be supported by evidence, and they should be used to explain findings and generate new hypotheses. So after you test your hypothesis, you get some findings, you will use certain theories to explain that findings. Right. So it makes sense, right? Hypothesis is different from theory. Okay, good. Okay, so in order to test the hypothesis, we need to select appropriate study designs and measure. So what makes a good measure? Usually I would just let you discuss, but since we are almost out of time, I'm going to go through this very quickly. We want the measure to be reliable and valid. What does it mean to be reliable? So reliability is when the test or measure gives us a consistent result over time for trials. When a measure has low reliability is when the measure gives us different results every single time. or most of the time. One example would be when we try to measure our weight, we use the weight scale, and it should give us consistent results, right? And then we'll say this scale is reliable. If you step on the scale and it gives you a different reading every 5 minutes, you'll be like, hey, this is broken. So that's not reliable. So it should give you consistent results. Validity is when the test is really measuring the variable that we are interested in and not something else. So this helps us ensure our dependent variable is caused by the independent variable. Okay, so one example is if I ask you to use a measure tape to measure your weight, it's not a valid tool, right? Because it should measure length. A weight scale should be used to measure your body weight, and that would be a valid measure. Okay? Okay. You got it, right? Okay, it's not too abstract. Okay, under validity, we have two types of validity. One is internal validity. That's the extent to which only the IV influences DV. And that's what we just talked about, like general validity. And then we have external validity. This is the extent to which the findings is replicable in different methods and for different people, also known as generalizability. So your finding, does it generalize to a larger population, or does it generalize to other people? Let's say I did a research here. 80% of my participants are white. Will my finding generalize to mostly black community or population, or will it generalize to Asian community? We don't know, so we need to do more research using more black people or Asian people to get a more generalizable finding. All right, so that would be the external validity. Any question? We're good? Okay, so we need to have at least two groups in an experiment. So we need to have the control and the experimental. The control group is when the group does not receive the independent variable, and the experimental is the group that receives the independent variable. And we need to have a random assignment. That's when participants are randomly assigned to each group. Why? We don't have time to discuss that, so I'm going to just give you the answer. Is to minimize individual differences. Does it make sense? Because everyone's different. They might behave differently. And we can't just assign, like, I'm assigning man, woman, man, woman. And then I just keep assigning women to a group and men to a group. You're going to see difference. So I want to randomize them. Okay? All right. Questions? We don't have time for questions. So let's do this real quick. Dr. Summer said Terry did a bad job on his essay. 2 days later, Terry submitted the same essay and asked Dr. Summer to read it. However, this time, Dr. Summer said that Terry did a great job. Is this a reliability problem or validity problem? Reliability? Validity? All right. Okay, so it should be reliability. If you don't know this yet, that's fine, because it could be confusing. Just read about it to understand it. You don't need to memorize the definition. Just understand what they mean. So it should be reliability because it's the same essay, but different feedback. Next. John weighs himself. The scale says, oh, this should be reliability. I already talked about it. All right. On our first exam, I will ask you to answer some chemistry questions. Is this a reliability problem or a validity problem? You can just say it. Validity. Very good. Validity. Okay. Stats. How many of you know stats or have been to a stats class? Okay, good. So you actually need to know stats to do a study. If you have not been in a stats class, that's fine. Just try to pair with group people who have been to stats class, and they should tell you. teach you. It's not going to be very hard. I can also teach you on those project dates. Just keep that in mind. So if you've been to a stats class, you get this joke. Is it not funny, or you just don't get it? Oh, come on. All right. I feel defeated. All right. Lastly, I'm going to finish this real quick. So communicate. How do you communicate your findings? You can do publications to journals, newspapers, and you can have classes like me. I'm teaching you guys about the findings. What else? Conferences, tech talks, or TV shows. That's it. All right, reminder, I think we're out of time. Your actual credit is due Sunday. Please read chapter 2 this weekend. Your second quiz is due Monday. Don't bring your eye clicker. We're not gonna worry about that. And then we're gonna talk about social cognition next class. Prepare for discussions and questions. Right. Oh, that's to sync the audio. I forgot to do that at the beginning.